Amid a world still reeling after the pandemic, the Caribbean suddenly erupted as a new hotspot shaken by the roar of American warships. Washington deployed a large fleet close to Venezuela, while Caracas immediately mobilized 15,000 troops, UAVs, and naval vessels to the Colombian border. The atmosphere of confrontation reminiscent of the Cold War has returned, raising the question, is Washington targeting the oil card, or is the real goal to dismantle the cartel state right next to America's southern flank? Venezuela has long been regarded as the world's black gold vault, with proven oil reserves of about 303 billion barrels, the highest figure globally. In the 1990s, the United States was heavily dependent on this supply, at one point importing up to 1.5 million barrels per day, accounting for nearly 16% of total oil imports. For Washington at that time, Caracas was not only an energy supplier, but also a strategic link in national energy security. But the turning point came in 2019 after a series of financial and trade sanctions. The United States reduced oil imports from Venezuela to zero. At the same time, the shale oil revolution transformed Washington from a major customer into one of the world's leading energy producers and exporters. Since then, Venezuelan oil has no longer played a decisive role in America's calculations. However, this does not mean oil has lost its strategic value, as China and India emerged as the largest customers buying hundreds of thousands of barrels daily. Oil resources became the tool for Caracas to maintain partnerships outside the Western Bloc. In a broader perspective, this is also the variable Washington must consider. Venezuelan oil could become a political lever for Beijing in South America, a region the United States has traditionally viewed as its backyard. In short, in today's US-Venezuela relations, oil is no longer the direct driver of action, but still serves as a sidecard in the US-China strategic rivalry. And precisely because oil has lost weight, the current focus has shifted to America's domestic security issues, drugs, and political pressure at home. In US-Venezuela, relations drugs are no longer merely a transnational crime problem, but have become a factor shaping Washington's domestic security policy. Reports from the DEA show Venezuela is now the largest cocaine transit hub in the Western Hemisphere, with more than 250 tons per year transported through Central America into US territory. This means that in Washington's eyes, Caracas is not just a troublesome partner, but a direct link in the chain of threats inside the United States. That perception has brought a clear set of tools, targeted sanctions, asset freezes, maritime interdictions, and even judicial bounties on individuals accused of involvement in drug trafficking networks. The increase in the reward for President Nicolas Maduro from $15 million in 2020 to $50 million in 2025 is clear evidence. This is one of the rare cases where a head of state is placed on the same level as individuals accused of being international terrorist leaders. The timing becomes clear when placed in the context of US domestic affairs. Deaths from fentanyl and cocaine have reached record levels, turning drugs into a full-scale public security crisis. In a contentious election year, pressure from public opinion and political rivals makes it difficult for the White House to stop at diplomatic statements. When domestic risks exceed the threshold of tolerance, foreign policy is often forced to shift gears, from economic pressure to demonstrations of military strength. From an analytical perspective, this explains why US policy toward Venezuela remains tough despite changes in the energy market. The issue is no longer oil, but Washington's view of Caracas as a dangerous link in the global drug supply chain. In other words, in Washington's eyes, eliminating the cartel is now the reason that compels immediate action. The question for observers is, when a nation's image has been tightly bound to the global drug flow, is there still a path to escape the spiral of tensions with the United States? This is not only Venezuela's puzzle, but also a test for the international order where non-traditional security issues may matter even more than resources and energy in shaping the policies of superpowers. Venezuela is not only known for its massive oil reserves or its role in drug smuggling routes, but has also become a strategic foothold in the global contest between the United States and Russia and China. This is why Washington often places Caracas in the category of special security concerns. On the economic and diplomatic front, according to Brookings' analysis, China once used the oil for credit framework with a total value of tens of billions of US dollars to bind Caracas, turning energy resources into a tool for long-term interest alignment. At the same time, Beijing also engaged in several extraction projects in the disputed Essequibo region, giving the Venezuelan issue an added geopolitical dimension. On the military side, according to Reuters and BBC sources, Russia has repeatedly showcased long-range presence in the Caribbean. Moscow's deployment of two 160 strategic bombers landing in Caracas in 2018 and 2022 signaled the Kremlin's intent to maintain a springboard right on America's southern flank. In addition, arms contracts with Russia from Su-30 Mk-2 fighters to the S-300 VM air defense system once helped Venezuela possess a force capable of deterrence in the region. Taken together, this shows that Washington does not only see Venezuela through the lens of drugs or oil, but also regards it as a strategic platform that global rivals could exploit. The question is whether Caracas can actively control this role or will fall into a position dominated by outside powers. From Caracas' perspective, the interpretation is entirely different. The Maduro government has repeatedly asserted that drug allegations are merely a pretext, while Washington's real goal is regime change. This argument is not accidental. They constantly draw comparisons with historical precedents from Panama in 1989 to Grenada in 1983, where the United States cited security reasons to carry out hardline measures. From this viewpoint, offering a bounty on a head of state is considered to cross the red line of international law. Caracas argues that this move not only targets Venezuela, but also sets a dangerous precedent, opening the possibility that other countries in the future could face a similar situation. This is how the Maduro administration seeks to elevate the issue from a bilateral dispute to a question of international norms. On the global stage, reactions are quite varied. The European Union and the United Nations have called for dialogue, stressing that the most sustainable path remains a political solution rather than military intervention. Russia and China have also voiced opposition to excessive pressure, but notably they have not provided direct military guarantees for Caracas. This reflects a reality. Although Venezuela wants to rely on major partners to balance the United States, the level of assurance remains limited and leans more toward political and diplomatic support than military backing. Viewed from multiple angles, Caracas' argument seeks both to defend domestic legitimacy and to attract sympathy from the international community. The key question is whether the strategy of highlighting the Panama precedent can truly persuade global opinion, or whether it will ultimately only reinforce the perception that Venezuela is trapped in a geopolitical game larger than itself. From a military standpoint, the balance of forces between the United States and Venezuela is almost entirely unequal. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, the United States possesses the most modern tools: Arleigh Burke-class destroyers carrying dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles, nuclear submarines with comprehensive deterrence capability, P-8, Poseidon reconnaissance, and anti-submarine aircraft, along with Marine forces capable of deploying F-35B fighters. This power structure allows the United States to control both sea and air almost absolutely. Meanwhile, Venezuela faces a completely different reality. According to Separai data, most of its naval vessels are outdated, many belonging to the Lupo class from the 1980s. The Su-30 fleet was once a source of pride, but limited budgets have severely constrained maintenance and training capacity. Caracas is therefore forced to adopt an asymmetric approach, mobilizing the Bolivarian militia claimed to number in the millions, using Iranian-origin UAVs or armed speedboats to harass and prolong the conflict. This strategy recalls how Iran has dealt with the Strait of Hormuz, not aiming for outright victory, but seeking to raise the adversary's cost of confrontation. For Venezuela, success lies not on the battlefield, but in the ability to mire the United States in a drawn-out conflict. Even if military superiority is overwhelmingly on the side of the United States' political costs, and the risk of eroding regional consensus, OAS CARICOM, could rise quickly if the conflict drags on. This is the point that forces Washington to consider overwhelming hard power does not equate to low cost. And when a conflict expands, the impact does not stop with Caracas and Washington, but spreads across the entire Caribbean and South America. Therefore, the decisive factor is not whether the United States can strike, but when to strike, and for what purpose it truly makes sense. Looking at the reasons the United States chose this moment, it is clear that oil no longer holds the central role it once did. Washington has achieved energy independence thanks to the shale revolution, making it hard to claim the objective is to reclaim oil from Caracas. The issue lies deeper, dismantling what the United States considers a cartel state tied to drug trafficking and an anti-Washington stance. This relates not only to domestic security, but also to America's way of sending a broader message about its leadership role in the region. From an international perspective, this action is strategic, affirming that the United States remains the leader in the Western Hemisphere. As Russia and China expand their influence in South America, Washington wants to prove it will not allow any outside power to establish a lasting foothold in what it considers its geopolitical backyard. The lessons here are broad. First, a nation that relies too heavily on resources while neglecting governance reform will sooner or later fall into a spiral of dependency and crisis. Second, alliances with external great powers may bring short-term benefits, but when upheaval comes, no one can guarantee rescue. This is a reminder that sustainable strength cannot come only from resources or outside backing, but must rest on transparent institutions, a diversified economy, and a long-term strategy aligned with global realities. In your view, what is the most important factor determining a nation's true strength, weapons, institutions, or social cohesion? Share your perspective in the comments. If you found this analysis useful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to follow more global, political, and current affairs analysis. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the video.